our fourth one already. This research, just like our previous versions, is still based on work done by every Texan, and it was supposed to be a mini update of 2020 in response to really the massive impacts of what we've all seen economically from the COVID-19 pandemic and the related economic downturn that's impacted women and families. But I think by the time we get done with this next hour, and after you look at the report online, you're going to agree that it is anything but mini and has many, many valuable findings in these areas. The study also highlights some really specific policy issues that we hope you will join with us at the Texas Women's Foundation as we move into the 2023, the 88th legislative session, and think about joining our Army of Advocates, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that at the end. We use research like this to meet with elected officials, of course, to educate our donors and the community, but it's also an immensely important part of driving our grant making. And this is letting us know the areas that we can make the most impact. And as a result of that, I also want to say a special thank you to 4 special guests that we have here today who are representing some of those grantees and are helping us with the launch. So I'm going to say your name and ask you to stand up if you feel comfortable. So first of all, from ScholarShot and representing our education pillar, we have Effie Kahindi. Effie, where are you, dear? There she is. From the Health Services of North Texas, we have Magdalene Iwoko. Magdalene, thank you. Yeah, the school desks are a bit of a challenge. Coming over from Fort Worth and representing the Center for Transforming Lives, which is a housing partner for us, we have Patricia Hill. There. And then also we have Alicia Mitchell from our long time partner, Dallas After School. So I want to thank you all for being here, and they've actually agreed to do some interviews for us later on and talk about their experiences with these grantees, so it's a great gift. Now, there are some big impacts to the data that we used in this report that came across as a result of COVID, and I want to address these right up front. As you may remember, in our regular economic issues report, our typical source of data, I've got to find my little clicker. Our typical source of data is the American Community Survey. And that is a U.S. Census Bureau publication that actually directs how over $700 billion worth of money is spent every year at the state and the federal levels. Everything from highways to hospitals to food banks, you name it, the ECS is super important. However, the U.S. Census decided not to publish this in the fall of 2021, which would have given us 2020 numbers, due to a higher than usual non-response rate, and then also those that did respond tended to be much higher income. So it was really going to skew the data. So this was an important decision that they made. So in its place, this report relies heavily on a new U.S. Census report called the Household Pulse Survey. It was started in April of 2020, specifically to look at the economic and social impacts of COVID. And they actually ran it in cycles. So about every 3 months, they would run another round of surveys. They even changed the questions over the last 2 years, and they're still doing this. But what this means is that we cannot compare apples to apples, the data that is in this report with the data that's in the previous ones, right? Because we don't know exactly who were the survey respondents. So this is really a new report in a lot of ways. It's giving us a great snapshot of the data, but we just want to kind of make sure that we understand that this is most likely a temporary data source. I'm assuming they're not going to continue it. And I haven't heard if we're going to get an ACS report this fall or not. So, and I'm looking at a couple of people that might know, and they're making faces at me too. So, so we will see. Hopefully we're going to get it, and then hopefully for sure by the time we get ready to publish again in 2024, 2025, we will definitely have these ACS numbers. But as always, there's no change in the depth of references that are used. There's 178 endnotes in this report, and they're all available at the end of the full report. So also, whether you're here in person or you are virtual, we're going to have time for questions at the end. So please think about those and get those ready. Let's see if this works. Yay! Now, as in the past, we are still focused on those 4 pillars of economic security, right? Education, childcare, health insurance, and housing. But you're also going to see some new components in this report around digital access, the cost of caregiving on women staying and sometimes leaving the workforce, and of course, on eviction. Women make up half of the state's population, but overall they are still not as economically secure as men. So strengthening these pillars really provides a path for Texas women and girls to keep them and let them go from surviving to thriving, and at the same time, building the overall economy of our cities, our counties, and our state. Whoops. Now, Texas women contribute a diverse collection of lived experiences and perspectives and voices across the state. And so I really want to set the stage, first of all, by looking at some demographics of who are Texas women. Over the past decade, the population of Texas has grown 16%, while the number of Texas women has grown 18%. And so what that means is that today, Texas is home to over 14.6 million women and girls. What it also means, and I have to say I was a bit amazed, is that Texas has more women than 46 other states have people. All right? So we are a big player in the country. Numbers like this make it really, really easy to see why having prosperous women and families is inextricably linked to having a prosperous and strong Texas. Now, between 2009 and 2019, and that's what we're taking a look at here, over 1.1 million women joined the working age group, which is 25 to 64. That's what the census considers that. And that was also an 18% increase, and that's that blue line that you see all the way up there at the top. Now, also in Texas, 41% of women are non-Hispanic white, 39% are Hispanic or Latina, 3% are Black or African American, 5% are Asian, and 2% are other. Add all this up, what you get? 59% of Texas women are women of color. And between 2009 and 2019, the population of Latinas grew by 29%, which is actually the largest percentage increase, or the largest number increase. And that's the green line you see there, second from the top. Asian women, and this was also in our 2020 report, represent the largest percentage increase, with 66% more women claiming Asian descent in 2019 than in 2009. And so that's the blue line that's at the bottom, that's still going up. Now, Texas is a place where people come from all over the world to find economic opportunity. And in fact, 17% of Texas women and girls are foreign-born. And of those, 59% are not U.S. citizens. And what that means is 1 in 10 of all Texas women and girls is not a U.S. citizen. The ever-increasing number of Texas women who are of Hispanic descent is a demographic wave, which you'll see here in the green, that really dictates our country's and our state's future. The issues that impact or impede these women and their families will impact Texas. And the distribution of women by race and age is really important as we think later on about childcare, about education, because you have to get ready in advance for what's ahead of you. And this helps us get there. Because unless we invest in making sure that childcare and education is available for all and affordable, and we're able to support those young working moms and young working families, then the economic future of Texas is just not sustainable. Now, unfortunately, ever since we started reporting on this in 2014, women continue to be disproportionately impacted by poverty. About 15% of Texas women and girls, or 2.1 million, experienced poverty in 2019, compared to 12% of Texas men and boys. And for a family of 3 this year, that means it's an annual income of less than about $23,000. So family of 3, $23,000. These poverty guidelines are actually set by the U.S. government. The dollars vary by family size, and they get much more complicated than just this little chart I've got here. But they are not impacted by geography. So it doesn't matter if you live in Dallas or El Paso, Amarillo, or Tyler. The income levels that make a family eligible for the same types of benefits are the same. And women are more likely to live in poverty because they're overrepresented in low-wage jobs. They're more likely to be raising children alone compared to men. And single moms work really hard to support their children. Yet they're over twice as likely as single dads to live below the poverty threshold. I mean, I often say that I think lower income single moms may be some of the best accountants in our communities, because when you add up their income and you add up the outgo, the math just doesn't work. But somehow they make it work, right? Month after month after month, but they shouldn't have to. And that's kind of what we're really trying to highlight in these policies and reports like this today. Now, race and ethnicity also impact the likelihood that a woman in Texas is going to experience poverty in her lifetime, with 1 in 5 Latinas and Black women having incomes below the poverty line, which is more than twice the rate of poverty for white women. And LGBT women in Texas are also more likely to experience poverty compared to non-LGBT women. And in fact, women who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender are more likely to be unemployed, be food insecure, lack health insurance, and make less than $24,000 a year than non-LGBT women, due to the intersection of discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Now, the Texas Women's Foundation knows and acts on the ways that the intersection of gender, race, ethnicity, and class shape a person's lived experience. And we take this into consideration in our granting and also strive to include it in our research. However, many of the data sources that we have continue to be limited to a binary gender and to a greatly simplified definition of race. We know that these overly broad groupings can mask really important differences and obscure the way that people, institutions, and policies treat various groups. So we can only report on the data that we have, but we want to make it clear that we know the story is incomplete and continue to work on making the data more inclusive of everybody's story. Now, this section on pay is new this year, and it's one of the things the Household Pulse survey gives us, and we really are able to look deeper at the impacts of unemployment, at federal programs, and their impact on families. Now, there's no surprise here that the pandemic exacerbated the economic challenges many Texas women were already facing. According to the Household Pulse survey, over 60% of Texas women were in households that had difficulty paying for their usual household expenses during the pandemic. And this is where support like CARES funding really comes in. Throughout the economic, let's see, does this show up? Okay, this is peach colored for those of all who can't tell. Throughout the economic issues report, you're going to find peach colored charts that stand out better than this one. And the color change means that this is a COVID analysis, all right? It's a COVID statistic. And this first one we're looking at looks at how families met their monthly bills. So in 2021, 1 out of 4 women in Texas were in households that had lost their regular source of income from before the pandemic. And for those families who lost a job in some way, the top 3 sources of funds for their monthly bills were credit cards and loans, using money from savings, and then also 3, which I think is the 4th one down, support received through the stimulus payments. And there were, as you probably remember, 2 real big types of financial support that was provided to families during COVID. One was the CARES Act and the different stimulus payments, and the other was the expanded child tax credit. The child tax credit changed in 2 big ways during COVID. First, the amount that families could receive increased from about $2,000 per child to between $3,000 and $3,600 per child, depending upon the age of the children. And then the second big change was that families were able to receive a part of their allowance in advance on a monthly basis rather than getting it all at tax time. And that not having to wait means that in the second half of 2021, Texas families received over $9.5 billion in advance tax credits, with an average monthly payment per family of $445. These 2 changes put together made significant impacts on reducing child poverty and child hunger. 50% of families report using the child tax credit for food costs, followed by educational costs and also utilities. I've been spending a lot more time on eviction the last few years, which is something kind of new to me. And one of the things that I learned is that having your utilities cut off is a grounds for eviction. In many cases, you have broken your lease. So spending money on utilities is a true action towards housing stability, which we're also going to talk about more in a little bit. Now, one more COVID slide. Once again, it's peach. Just use your imagination. before we move on to education. The pandemic really highlighted caregiving, and women played an outsized role here. Care for children, care for family, and to be really honest, care for important parts of our community. Patricia is here with us today, and she has a new position with the U.S. Postal Service. I don't think that I have the, I do, here it is. Okay, there, Patricia's number 3, right there. 71% of U.S. postal workers are women, and I was really amazed by that. Over 20% of Texas women work in fields that were considered essential, which is what we're looking at. And in many cases, as you can tell, it's way over half of these essential jobs are held by women. And in some of these, particularly in childcare and in education, the workforce is slow in coming back, so then that even further impedes the ability of families to also go back to their own jobs and return to their lives. I would say pre-COVID, but I don't quite know what to call this time that we're in right now. These caregiving roles in daycare, in school, in elder care are traditionally very low paying. And the average caregiving wages nationally for these roles are $25,000 a year. And actually over 40% of this workforce participate in some type of public benefit just to make ends meet. Now cities like San Antonio and Austin, and also counties like Dallas, Bexar, and Travis have all raised their minimum wage from the federal $7.25 up to $15 per hour, moving them a bit closer to a livable wage. And if Texas or the federal government were to increase the minimum wage, over 2.5 million women in Texas would benefit, because 6 out of 10 Texas women, or 6 out of 10 minimum wage workers in Texas are women. And caring is not just a profession. It is something that women are often expected to do without pay in a society that does not provide adequate family supports. Before the pandemic, unpaid caregivers, the majority of whom are women, so here we're talking daughters caring for elderly parents, we're talking moms caring for kids, provided about $470 billion worth of care services to their communities every year. And across the nation, 6 out of 10 unpaid caregivers, family caregivers, are women. And when family members have to leave the workforce to provide this care, research provided by the Asset Funders Network shows that that unpaid caregiver can lose $300,000 in income over her lifetime. And U.S. working women lost $20 billion per year providing these sorts of services by having to take time off from their other jobs. So now we're to our first real pillar, which is education. And we see this as setting the stage for opportunity and economic stability, or at least it can. Now, higher levels of education can lead to women in Texas earning more and experiencing an overall increase in their quality of life. And when it comes to access and completion of post-secondary issues, Texas women are really taking leads. Ever since we started reporting on this back in 2014, women have led on educational attainment in both enrolling and in completing their education. In fact, in Texas, women are 1.5 times as more likely to complete higher education as men and completing college. And you can see here, this goes back to 2014. The gap stays pretty consistent. The lines are parallel in many, many ways. Texas's Latinas and Black women are the main contributors to women's advancement in educational attainment. And I think that's particularly important with us sitting here at Texas Women's University, who have a very, very large student base of women of color and first-generation college students. Yet, Latinas and Black women with 17% and 28% respectively, having a bachelor's degree or higher, still lag far behind other racial and ethnic groups. And in order for the numbers of men and women both to succeed in higher education and for Texas to succeed, these both need to go up considerably. Uh-oh. Ha. No. Here we go. Now, the more educated women are, the lower their chances of experiencing poverty. But they are still more likely to have economic instability compared to men. Now, I remember when we did our first economic issues for women in 2014, and in that particular study, we broke out 9 different metropolitan areas. And one of the statistics we looked at that time was wage gap. And this kind of explains this when you look at average incomes for like less than high school graduates, you see that women are still more likely to live in poverty than men at those levels. So one of the numbers that came up was related to Somervell County. Somervell County is a little bit south of Fort Worth. And at that time, the wage gap in Fort Worth was right about $11,000 a year, okay, average wage gap, male, female. But Somervell was reporting $20,000. So first I had to figure out where Somervell was, I'll be real honest. And then I also wanted to figure out what was going on in this predominantly rural county, where our data also showed that the educational levels of men and women were about the same, all right? So they should have kind of matched right along. Well, little research. At that time, Somervell was the center point of Barnett Shale. And so men had jobs in trucking, in oil and gas, and natural gas, and in mining. Women with the same level of education were waitresses and childcare workers. And so you have the men having really great paying jobs in the Barnett Shale, and women who were faring much, much worse. And that's kind of one of the areas where you can see where gender-based job norms really impact the wage gap for men and women, even at similar educational levels. Now, education as a road to economic security is not a guarantee, and it's an area where policy can make a big difference. The cost of education is a big driver. Since 2009, tuition and fees per full-time student in Texas have exceeded the state general revenue support for public universities. And one result is that students often are required to take on more debt. And we know that student debt is a serious stumbling block to financial security, and this is especially the case for women and women of color, who tend to borrow more than men, borrow at higher interest rates, and face additional challenges with repayment once they get into the workforce. Overall, women in Texas have a debt-to-income ratio that is 13 percentage points higher than men. And we would support a student loan cancellation program of at least $30,000 to help eliminate the student debt burden for those in need, and also assist with post-pandemic economic recovery. Now, the recent Inflation Reduction Act cancels $10,000 to $20,000, and that is a great start. Because people who receive this sort of relief will be able to pay down other debts, add to their savings for emergencies, buy a home, start a business, and prepare for retirement, all which are important parts of an economy that is running on all cylinders. And it would also significantly reduce the racial wealth gap for borrowers of color. Okay, it's peach. Now, I'm not revealing any big news to you that when I tell you another area that COVID has really impacted is education. 3 in 5 Texas women were in households where someone's post-secondary educational plans changed due to the pandemic. And in these homes, almost 1 in 3 reported that the change was because they were not able to pay for their educational expenses due to changes in income, which is that 31% line you see right there. I also like to point out, referring back to the cost of care that we talked about just a second ago, that 9% of these changes in educational plans were driven by disruptive care agreements. And so you'll see we've got at close to the bottom 3% caring for someone with coronavirus, 6% caring for others whose care arrangements were disruptive. So principally all those children that some of us had at home unexpectedly for a while. So to close out education, Texas women have been increasing their educational attainment across all institutional types, and women of color are the key drivers of this. However, both the pandemic and student loan debt are threatening women's enrollment persistence, and as well as their ongoing economic security. So we move on to childcare. We've always talked about childcare as being a pillar of economic security for Texas women. And as over half of Texas moms work to support their families, access to quality, affordable childcare is imperative. Now, these numbers here are from just before COVID, so this is 2019. And they've gone up a little bit, actually, since our previous report, when we found at that time that 62% of women with children under 16 at home were in the workforce, and what you see here is we've got 70%. And this is yet another one of those statistics that I really am looking forward to the ACS. This is an ACS statistic from before COVID. So one that we'll be able to compare apples to apples when we get the next one out. And for those who can find it, the cost of childcare continues to rise. The costs actually increased 16% from 2018 to 2021 across all age groups of kids. And what this means is that childcare is taking up an increasingly large part of women's earnings and leaving a lot less money for other necessary expenses. So for a woman making the median wage in Texas, okay, $41,700, year-round infant care takes up 21% of her earnings, which is the gray bar you see here, all the way over to your right. But once again, when we look at that intersection of race and gender, we see that for Latinas, whose median income is $31,500, but she's paying that same child care for that infant, you're seeing a percentage of pay that is much, much higher, going up to 27%. Here we have another peach-colored COVID chart that shows all the ways that families adapted during COVID to care for their kids. And you would truly have to have been living under a rock to not know that COVID threw care arrangements for everybody, I mean, all up and down the socioeconomic level into disarray. But on top of rising costs, the pandemic also led to a decrease in the availability of care. And we're waiting, really, I think, for child care services to continue to get back to normal. From July to October of 2021, about a third of Texas women were in households where children under 5 were not able to attend daycare or another type of child care arrangement because it was closed, it was unavailable, it was unaffordable, or due to safety concerns. And that is a full year plus after we started the COVID epidemic. Also in these households, over 1 in 5 reported that an adult, not necessarily the woman, did have to take time, unpaid time out of the workforce in order to care for those kids. So once again, we're looking at the cost of care. Taking time out of the workforce to care for a child or an elder is a major driver of the gender wage gap. It has been for years as women tend to come in and out of the workforce more than men do. And this is an issue that I've actually been talking about for the last couple of years. And those of you that are employers, that are hiring managers, is that I think you are, if not already, you're definitely going to soon be seeing applications and resumes with gaps, with COVID gaps in them. And it's really important as you start to interview these women, and in some cases men, that you never doubt their ability to work, their conviction to work, their commitment to their career, and discount those convictions because of a supposed choice they had to take time out of the workforce. So it's just one of those kind of check your bias, and maybe it was shorthand before COVID, but you're going to be seeing a lot more of it, and so I hope that everybody will take that into account. So some takeaways from this pillar. Childcare, critical work support for working families and women in Texas. And our society really has to find a way to make this system more affordable, because spending 21% or 27% of your income is not sustainable. And this is an important area where COVID is going to continue to be felt for a really, really long time. And of course, another one still going to be felt is health insurance. Where's my pretty picture? And what we see here is that this is a financial shield against unexpected, but also fully expected healthcare expenses that we all incur. Now in Texas, over 1 in 5 working age women, remember we're going back to 25 to 64 years old, are uninsured. And that is twice the uninsured rate in the United States. Now here, we focus on working age women because if you are under 18, you have access to CHIP. And if you're 65 or over, you have access to Medicare. And in total, over 2.5 million Texas women were were uninsured right before the pandemic started. Texas ranks last in the country for women's health insurance coverage. And you can see also that coverage is very different once again when you see that Hispanic and Latinas also experience even double our rates of uninsurance. Now, the ACA marketplace actually saw a huge increase in enrollment during COVID. And in 2022, there was 1.8 million Texans, 1.8 million more Texans that enrolled for health insurance. And that was a 42% increase from previous enrollment periods. Part of that is due to expanded subsidies, which in the last probably 3 months, Congress has approved an extension of those additional subsidies for 3 more years. And so that's really good for Texas. And once again, this is something that we will see when we get the next ACS report to see how sticky that access to health insurance is. And while the Affordable Care Act made Medicaid coverage for low-income Americans possible, the Texas state legislature has yet to pass Medicaid expansion. And so as a result, 406,000 Texas women who live below the poverty line lack affordable coverage options, because that means they're also below the level to even get access to subsidies, okay? So because the program was figured out that if you make this much, you can get a subsidy. If you make this much, you don't get a subsidy. If you make this much, you do get a subsidy. But if you make this much, you're going to be on Medicaid, except for if you live in Texas. Texas is one of 12 states that has not yet expanded Texas. And I will let you know that Oklahoma even expanded Medicaid back in the summer of 2020, and we did not do that yet. In addition, Texas Medicaid has the most restrictive income limits in the country, and few qualify. So for instance, if you're a mom with 2 kids, you would need to make less than $230 per month to be eligible. So one more time, mom, 2 kids, $2,760 in 1 year in order to get Medicaid in Texas. Benefit levels at various states, they vary, but typically they use those poverty thresholds that we looked at a little bit ago. So therefore, in most states, that same family of 3, mom and 2 kids, would be able to make $21,000, $22,000, $23,000 and still get access to Medicaid. Now, in 2021, the Texas legislature extended coverage for postpartum Medicaid, because this is one area where women can get access to Medicaid while she is prenatal as well as postpartum. And for a long time in Texas, you got it for 60 days after you had your baby. Back 2 years ago, the Texas legislature expanded that to 6 months. That's a win, a bit of a win. However, in 2019, the Texas Department of State Health Services determined that almost 1 in 3 deaths occur after 43 days, and they found that 89% of pregnancy-related deaths could be prevented just by extending Medicaid coverage for 1 year. This is not a lot of money. This is not a lot of women. And this is an easy fix, so one that we will all certainly be seeing presented as bills in the upcoming legislature. You will hear us talk about it, and if this is your issue, I hope it's one that you will weigh in on as well. Another integral piece of health and economic security is access to contraception. According to Child Poverty Action Lab, right here in Dallas, less than half of women of reproductive age receive contraceptives or family planning services, even if they see a healthcare provider annually. And the most effective types of contraceptive, your LARCs, can cost $1,300, which is an unaffordable expense for many women that don't have health insurance. So access to health insurance and expanded Medicaid coverage, along with innovative programs like CPAL's Trust Her, really make family planning accessible to women in a manner that meets their needs across their whole lifespan. And the economic impacts are also clear in that access to contraception has actually increased women's earning power and decreased the gender wage gap. Women aged 18 to 21 have access to birth control, earn 5% more per hour, 11% more per year by the time they're 40. And that comes up to $2,200 more per year. Now, there's a lot more sections in the healthcare part of the report. You've got COVID, you've got mental health, and some domestic violence. These are all important issues that aren't going to go away, and I just could not hit today. So our key takeaways in health insurance is that women are twice as likely to be uninsured as women in the rest of the nation. That with over 1 in 5 working age women across the state. That Texas needs Medicaid expansion, and it would have immediate effects on 406,000 Texas women who are below the poverty line and lack affordable coverage. And last, that women of color are the least likely to have health insurance, with 1 in 4 Hispanic women uninsured as compared to white women, and we really see the impacts of this in pregnancy-related death in African American women. Now, our final pillar is housing, and we see that as an anchor for stable families. This is an area that Texas Women's Foundation really elevated in 2019 in response to our last eco issues, and then COVID hit in 2020, and it got to be even a bigger deal. Our granting and our focus is around a particular part of housing that we call housing stability. So stability includes the inability to afford housing, an anticipated eviction, being forced to move, and also the ability to use housing choice vouchers. So We want women at all of these levels to be able to seek safe housing for their families, and this is a true two-generation issue because families that are struggling with housing instability see negative impacts on employment, earnings, mental and physical health, and real increases in mental health trauma for children. Also, children that move often during the school year are less successful in school and more likely to not succeed compared to their peers. And for most Texas women, housing is the largest monthly expense. Where a woman lives determines where her kid goes to school, how long her commute to work is, if she can even get to work, and does she feel safe. Housing costs are considered to be too high when a household spends 30% or more of their income on housing. That's a HUD definition. And such families are considered housing cost burdened, which you see here in the top in the white. When families spend over a third, or in some cases over 50% of their money on housing, that leaves significantly less for health care, transportation, groceries, and for that child care we were talking about just a minute ago. Now, beyond affordability, the pandemic has intersected with and also worsened housing-related programs and problems such as domestic violence. And it's also renewed the emphasis on the ability to access internet for school and for work and how that changes across our communities. That's in the report too. And eviction now was something that we really didn't deal a lot with in our previous versions of this report, but this year obviously it was an unavoidable starting point. Despite a federal eviction moratorium intended to protect renters after the pandemic started, many Texans have been evicted due to a lack of enforcement. And now that the federal moratorium has ended, evictions in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston have increased to almost pre-pandemic levels. And you'll see here, Travis County, also, there's Austin, have been significantly lower than the other major areas. This data is from March. Austin's eviction moratorium actually expired at the end of March, and so we're probably going to be seeing some slightly increased numbers here, but they are going to continue to be lower than other areas because of tenant protections that they have. And now, eviction moratoriums are not the answer because landlords have bills too. Landlords deserve to be paid. And I don't want to make it seem that we just support free rent forever, but really this is just a way to highlight the need for a broken system, for the need for affordable housing, for action in policy and tenant protections, and legal aid on both sides so that it's always an even playing field in the event that there is an eviction filing. And I want to go back just a second to when I talk about evictions at pre-pandemic levels. So here, this is what you've got here. So we go January 2020, pre-pandemic, up to January of 2022. So what you've got is that in January of 2020, Houston in yellow was just shy of $7,000 eviction filings per month. Dallas and Fort Worth in green and blue, a little bit lower, we're about 4,000. And then you also see those tenant protections that I said were higher in Austin, because Austin, even pre-pandemic, is way down there at the bottom. So these are the sorts of issues that we need to think about at the statewide level so that all Texans have these benefits, not just the folks down in Austin. So as with our other pillars, I think it's important to continue to look at the interplay of gender with race and ethnicity. Studies show that 1 in 5 black women and 1 in 12 Latinas report having been evicted at least once as adults, compared to 1 in 15 white women. Also, women with children are the most likely to receive an eviction judgment. Evictions result in homelessness, school changes and non-attendance, court records, bad credit, and job loss. They also make it a lot harder to find subsequent housing, and so it's just this downward spiral of worse and worse quality homes. If you have not had the chance to read Dr. Desmond's very accessible book, Truly on Evictions, I highly recommend it. At Evicted, Poverty, and Profit in an American City. It actually started out as his PhD dissertation, and then he went on to win a Pulitzer and a National Book Award. So he had many more readers than I had for my own personal PhD dissertation. But anyway, I do have copies on my shelf. I have spare copies, as a matter of fact. So, but it's an excellent book. And if you don't have time to read the book, if you just Google it, there's a couple of great interviews with him. They last about an hour, particularly right when he won the National Book Award, that he talks through the book, and you'll get a great feel for what he's talking about. Peach. Now, there's a lot going on here, so I want to walk you through it just a little bit. Once again, this is a peach box, and this means it's from the Household Pulse Survey. Now, I've said this phrase several times, but what this really means is that this survey is done at the household level. So when we are looking at household pulse data, this is where the woman was the respondent, but it does not necessarily mean she is the only adult in the household. And so on the left, you are looking at owner-occupied homes, and on the right, you are looking at women that reported from homes that were renting. And between July and October of 2021, 16% of women in owner-occupied housing and homes also lacked confidence in their household's ability to make the next month's payment, which is that blue and purple slice. Put those together, you get 16. At the same time, you come over here to the right, and you look at the blue and the purple once again, and you will see an equally and even higher number of women who were not at all confident or only slightly confident in their ability to make their next month's payment. It's programs like this, numbers like this, that make me really proud of the coming up on $1 million that the Texas Women's Foundation has invested in housing stability just in the last couple of years, I guess since late 2020. And so we're working on this, and we need a lot of people to come along with us. So we have a lot more peach boxes on computer access, on internet availability, work, and school. Some of these analyses are done by income as well as by race. But to summarize, here's your housing takeaways. 20% of Texas homeowners and 45% of Texas renters are housing cost burdens. That evictions were a big problem before COVID, and it's even a bigger problem for Black families. So now you have all this information, and what are you going to do with it? We all only have so much time. So I think it's really important to think, first of all, what resonates with you the most? Is it a lack of health insurance and the high maternal mortality? Can you even imagine if your home might not be your home in a month? Maybe you remember how when you were looking for the exact right childcare center and you found it, and how much easier that made your life, and you also had the confidence that your child was going to be going on to a much more successful future. At the end of every section of this report, as well as at the very end of the report, there are policy recommendations that the Texas Women's Foundation has just gotten approved with our board of directors, and this is what we're going to be looking at in 2023. Our lead issues are tenants' rights, housing stability, access to health care and health insurance. And we're also going to be keeping our eye on movements and work supports, including child care and paid leave. So I know it is a lot, but the good news is you do not have to do this alone. Texas Women's Foundation is based on the premise of collective giving, and I think policy advocacy is the ultimate in collective action. I want you to sign up to be a part of us with our Army of Advocates. You can do that on the website and going through the website that you're going to see in just a little bit. But first of all, I want to pull out a couple of things. First of all, work support. Texas needs to establish paid family and medical leave program that supports workers during pregnancy, adoption, and extended medical care. This is a big employer issue as well, as it becomes more and more competitive to find the right people at your company. 2, Texas needs to not only extend maternal Medicaid from 6 to 12 months, but our legislators need to create a health insurance option that closes the coverage gap for low income to adults to get affordable care, as well as helping Texas access truly the billions of dollars in federal aid that would come along with it. We need to make sure that all types of contraception are included in these insurance plans and that the plans do not discriminate on gender or LGBT status. And 3, housing stability. All Texans need that tenant protections similar to what Austinites have. And we also need to make sure that legal aid is available to tenants so that eviction proceedings, it's not just the landlord that has an attorney. And in those cases where an eviction filing is thrown out or overruled, we need to make sure that's removed from that person's credit report and their legal file, because right now it is not. As promised, here's me. Here's the website, txwfecoissues.org. You can get there, you can see the whole report, you can see the PDF. You can look at some great stories of women and men from across Texas that have sent us ideas and let us know how the different pillars have impacted them. Now it's your turn. You really need to take a peek at it, share it with your networks, with your colleagues, with your churches. Keep it in mind for those future calls to your elected officials, because I know you're going to be making calls to your elected officials. And the fact that you are here with us today lets me know already that you at least share with Texas Women's Foundation a few of these important issues. A few final words before your questions. We have elections coming up in November for every single top Texas office, as well as many U.S. congressional and legislative offices. State politics and local politics matter. I want you to commit to voting this November. I want you to take somebody with you. And then afterwards, in 2023, I want you to commit once again to reaching out to your elected officials at least 3 times. Give your opinion on a pending bill or a city law. Ask for their opinion on something that you care about, or just say thank you for your service. It is easy. It's an easy phone call, and you can find this information online. And if you're part of our Army of Advocates, we're going to continue to push this sort of information out. As a matter of fact, we're going to do an even better job of pushing this information out than we used to in the past, because this week we hired our first ever Director of Advocacy and Policy, Laura Atlas-Kravitz, who's over here in the booth. And so she has been tasked with making sure that we get all of you the information, as well as people like me, that I need. Also, I want you to think about, and now I have to turn my page because this is like really important. Work with your HR departments to make sure that people can get 4 hours paid time off to go and vote. This is a major way to increase voter representation. Recent studies show that citizens in Black communities wait 29% longer, and voters in that area are also 74% more likely to wait for 30 minutes or more. Having paid time off during the workforce increases access for hourly workers, and it actually decreases the wait time for all of us, because fewer people are trying to squish into those few hours in the morning or after work before or after the workday. Lastly, sign up to be a poll worker. This is an incredible service. You can do it during early voting, or you can do it just on election day. It is a long day, I know, because I do it. My husband does it. I will tell you, I started it doing during COVID because I figured all those oftentimes much older people, older than me, did not want to come out during COVID to do it, so I signed up. I was amazed at how rewarding it was, at how fast the day went, and you even get paid. People call it volunteering, but it's not. You actually get paid. So I want to thank you all for the work that you do with us, and thank you for being here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dena, we have one question from online.
Okay.
So what does the role of entrepreneurship play in the economic stability for women across Texas?
I'm sorry, what kind of leadership?
The role of entrepreneurship?
Oh, entrepreneurship. So I think that women-owned small businesses and has had a big impact on women's ability to work, women with small children. That was the original flexible workday, right? Back before the rest of us had the ability to have that flexibility. So I would see that entrepreneurship is an important way to have women in leadership, to have women as leading their companies. They're setting the business policies, and they're not just small companies. They're going to be bigger and bigger companies. And it's oftentimes changes in what I call small p policy, business policies, that really can then vibrate throughout the community as we see changes that are also at the legislative level. I think we've got a question right here, dear. Well, hold on, we actually have a mic for you.
I was just wondering, since we're talking about like the gap for women financially, more speaking, is there a structure surrounded around maternity leave? So that's something I experienced. So, you know, we get the bereavement or whatever, and they pay like the FMLA. They take the money first. Now they have the dads out for maternity leave as well. So now both the breadwinners are like cut in finances. And then I had a baby that was premature, so it extended my maternity leave, and then I didn't get paid at all. So is there something to support, like a better structure in supporting women for maternity leave?
So once again, big P versus little p, right? While it's important that businesses provide paid leave for their workers, many other states do provide paid time off at the state level. California provides this for workers. And so there is no structure right now in Texas, and that's definitely something that needs to be looked at, because we do want it to be parental leave, because it's important for moms to take the time off that she needs as a new mom. We want dads to take the times off because we want everybody involved in raising that family. And it is that time that you take off at the beginning, like I said a second ago, and then you might have to take off later, that continues to contribute to the long-term wage gap that we see with women and men. And we're running a bit over, so I'm going to take one more question, then I think we should probably close up. Oh, hi there. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. So we talked a little bit about contraception and childcare. One like overarching thought in my mind right now is the overturn of Roe v. Wade. What do you think this will do to the results of surveys like this? How is the foundation kind of looking at that, and how are you anticipating what's to come, especially in a state like Texas, after what we experienced?
Sure. So this summer, the Texas Women's Foundation actually launched a new healthcare access reproductive freedom fund. And we are really looking at how can we address the need for additional reproductive services at the first, healthcare deserts. So we're going to be making we're looking to raise $1.25 million by next June, with $1 million in grants going out, some this December, some by next May. First tranche will be, think of Panhandle, West Texas, and swoop down around to the valley. And then in the spring, it'll be Dallas, 14 counties, as well as going over to East Texas. What we're really looking at there is the need to potentially train additional staff in these healthcare desert areas, hire staff. When you go back to CPAL's work, does the clinic actually need to buy long-acting reversible contraceptives, which are very expensive, to have them on the shelf? So when the woman finds transportation, finds the childcare, drives the 2 hours to get to where she needs for the care, they don't tell her to come back in 2 weeks after they've ordered it. So these are some of the ideas. We are talking at the moment to 8 really great organizations in this kind of West Texas and Valley area. The grants will be even larger than they have been for us in the past, and we're going to be getting those out really soon. So for us, it is what can we do to increase access, either through staffing, through services, through training. Many of these community clinics might need additional training of, let's say, a family practitioner or a nurse practitioner who in the past had not provided contraceptive or reproductive services, but they can get there. They just need some additional support. So that's kind of the stuff we're looking at, and we're going to know probably by November what kind of grants we're able to give out and put in that area. So like I said, right now the program runs through next June. I would be stunned if everything is fixed by next June. But thank you. So I think I'm going to have to say goodbye now, but I'm going to introduce Nikki Woodard, our CEO, and she's going to come and say final words.
Hello, everyone, and I will make this quick. I am Mickey Woodard. I am the president and CEO of the Texas Women's Foundation, and I just want to thank you all. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for staying with us to hear this important information that Dena shared. I also want to thank Corrine Phaeton and the staff at the Texas Women's University. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for opening your doors, for providing resources, for hosting us again. We are very, very grateful for all of your support, because all of this happens in partnership, so thank you. We hear stories every single day, about various issues that women and families face. But seeing and hearing these stories like you shared today, so thank you, reveals the depths of these issues. It shows just how much our voice and our support really and truly does matter, and that we need to make changes. And that is what we can do together. So I want to go all the way back to the beginning of Dena's presentation. 14 million women in this state, larger population than 46 states. That's a really significant number. And you also talked about how this shows where we are going, not just as a state, but as a country. So Texas Women's Foundation is using this research to share with various community leaders, corporations, and policymakers across the state. Thank you, Laura. So that we can all take part implementing these practices that can help shift these numbers. We will use this information to build a strong advocacy platform that will drive positive social and economic change statewide. You being here today means so much to us, because we know it will take voices and it will take advocates to impact the numbers that we are hearing and seeing in this report. So, as Dena said, we invite you, join us, Army of Advocates, today, so you can start to take part in this movement and get the information that you need on how to participate. The more that we grow our effort, the more that we amplify our voices in support of those communities who are silenced, the more we will see communities transformed. You can also join us. We have a luncheon coming up October 6th. If you join us, you will see more about how we are transforming communities, and you will be in good company. You will hear from Allison Felix, Olympian, track star, most decorated. She is incredible. And you will also get to hear from Cint Marshall, the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. It's going to be a very powerful conversation and combination. We look forward to joining forces with you so that we can build a stronger world. We can build stronger women. I'm going to do this all over again. How about this? We look forward to joining forces with you so that we can build stronger women to create a stronger Texas and a stronger world. Go to our website, txwf.org, to learn more about how you can activate and how you can advocate. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.